I also often share that the way that we really honor the gift of life and support the mission of the people of faith to be really pro-life generation is to support adoption. I've been very blessed to know number of adoptive parents and also adopted children. And Claire inspired me really through her witness and her story, how one life that was saved has become fruit of a new generation. She will share her own journey, her own story. She's a beautiful mom today, and we are so blessed to have her in our midst. So thank you so much, Claire, for making the trip. We are so blessed really to have you here with us. Thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming Claire.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with all of you. I am here from Texas. So, do you have any stereotypes about Texans? They're probably true. Really, it truly is an honor to be here with you. I'm so excited to be able to celebrate a post-Roe culture in our country with you. But most importantly, how we move forward right here in Boston. And I hope that my story will inspire you to know that what you're doing, your advocacy, your service to women and families in need in your community, it truly matters for someone like me and for someone like my family. So thank you for being here. I don't know about you, but I don't know what you were doing or what you were feeling when Roe v. Wade was overturned, but my first thought, as you'll hear in a moment, was that my twin must be rejoicing in heaven. And in fact, I believe that there was likely a choir bigger than Texas of aborted babies who were praising the Lord over what happened and who are praising the Lord over what you are going to be a part of in this post-Roe culture, because it's going to take all of us to move forward. And so with that, I want to encourage you today to choose to be a certain type of person. This is what type of person it's going to take to create the culture that truly values life, that truly changes hearts and minds on the issue of abortion. And that is a person of integrity, a person who stands for truth and wisdom, who isn't ashamed of who God created you to be, and He created every single one of us to be set apart from this world. A person who has confidence in disappointment because we can trust the God who goes before us. And as you'll hear tonight, that is such a huge part of my testimony, is being the type of person who can trust God in disappointment, because as you'll hear in a moment, I was faced with one of the greatest disappointments in all my life just a few years ago when I met my birth mother and found out the truth behind my birth story. And so I hope that as you hear my story today, that you will grasp the importance of standing for truth and life and why this matters right here. When I was growing up, I was an adopted child. My mom, who adopted me, is actually here today with me. And I can't think of a better upbringing than what my sister and I, my sister's also adopted, what we had. I mean, growing up as an adopted child in Texas was truly wonderful. We knew that we were wanted, chosen, and loved. Those were things that our parents spoke over us. And so, as you can imagine, to our surprise, when we got to elementary school and people started making remarks like, "We're so sorry you were adopted," or "What was it like at the orphanage?" I know that is somebody's story. Absolutely, that is somebody's story, but it wasn't mine. And I remember being so confused by those questions. I mean, adoption was our normal. It was wonderful to us. And I think the reason they thought that was because they had seen the movie Annie, and they thought that we lived with Miss Hannigan. But what we knew was that we were wanted, chosen, and loved, that adoption was our normal, that our adoption story was written exactly how it was supposed to be written because God wrote our story for us. And we knew that our birth mothers could possibly become part of our stories one day. And we didn't know what that would look like, but we were confident in who we were. And we were confident in our adoption story. And so adoption was something we talked about, but abortion wasn't. Abortion was something that I think if you had asked me all those years ago, if I would be the type of person who's been affected by abortion ever in my life, if the people around me were the type of people who'd been affected by abortion, I would have said no, absolutely not. I was raised in a Christian home. I was given a foundation. The type of person who's been affected by abortion is no one like me. And when I met my birth mother and found out my story that I'm about to tell you, I learned that I was so wrong, that I am the type of person who's been affected by abortion, and I just didn't know for 21 years of my life. When I was 20, I lived in College Station. How many of you have seen the movie Unplanned? Okay, every single one of you should be raising your hands right now. If you have not seen Unplanned, you have got to go see it. It's on Amazon Prime. It's about my great friend Abby, who ran an abortion clinic for 8 years, saw an ultrasound-guided abortion, saw what it did to the baby, and walked away. And she is one of the most influential people in the pro-life movement today. Well, I lived in College Station, which is the town where Abby ran the Planned Parenthood. She did. And so at the time, I lived there while she was running that Planned Parenthood, but I didn't know what Planned Parenthood was at that time. Like I said, we didn't talk about abortion growing up in my home. And so in school, I had this great plan for my life. I was going to be a nurse. I'm an introvert, 100% an introvert. Never wanted to be on stage in front of people, but God has a sense of humor for sure. But my plan was to be a nurse, and not just a nurse, like a home care one-on-one nurse. That's how introverted I am. And so every day on my way to school, on my way to work, I would drive past this Planned Parenthood, and I would see these people outside doing I didn't know what. And I thought, who are these weirdos? Like, they're sitting there staring at this Planned Parenthood. That's what I thought they were doing, staring, maybe praying. I don't know. It's a building. I knew what they advertised on TV, that they helped women, but that's all I knew. And so one day I stopped and I asked them what they were doing. And they said that they were there because Planned Parenthood was an abortion facility, and that they knew what abortion was, what it did to not only a baby, but to the mother, to the family, to the father, to the future generations, and that they were there to offer them real options, real support, send them to places like pregnancy resource centers and adoption agencies, walk alongside them, love them through this unexpected situation that they're in. And I thought, wow, I really like that. But me, being the introvert that I am, I walked away that day, literally wiped my hands clean and said, I'll never do that because I don't like controversy. I don't want to get involved in something that's offensive, that's just hard, in my opinion, in my introverted thought process. That's not something that I would ever do. But little did I know that was my first glimpse of God's bigger picture, his bigger plan for my life, because a few weeks later, I would go back to the sidewalk, go back to those people and tell them that I had just found out that I was the type of person who'd been affected by abortion, and I would offer for them to use my testimony to help these women and these families. Around that time that I was living in College Station and going to school, my sister met her birth mother, and I remember meeting her birth mother. It was the first time I had met her birth mother, and seeing them, they looked alike, they acted alike. I had this realization that, oh my goodness, this woman completed our family. She gave me my sister. She's absolutely incredible. I thanked her for giving me my sister. And that was the moment that I thought about my own birth mother. I had thought about her before, but I hadn't really humanized her and realized what a gift she was to me, that she had done the same thing as my sister's birth mother. She had given me my family, but not just that, she had given me my life, and she deserved to hear thank you. And so I went home and discussed with my parents, with my sister, about meeting my birth mother. And we all agreed we wanted the opportunity to thank her, to get to know her. And so the next day I called my adoption agency on the phone. And it's in Oklahoma City. It's called Deaconess. And a woman named Debbie answered the phone. And I told her who I was. I told her my whole, everything that I knew, which was very little about my birth mother. I told her that I would love the opportunity to meet my birth mother. But if not, I would love the opportunity for her to tell her how grateful I am. And so she said that she would start the search. But before she told me that, after I finished telling her all these things, she actually said, "Claire, I know exactly who you are. I'm actually staring at your baby picture on my desk. I've had it here for 21 years. She said, "I was actually your birth mother's caseworker." And she said, "In this picture, I'm looking at it, you have these little casts on your feet that corrected the problems with your feet. You have this harness on your hips that corrected your dislocated hip." And she said, "You were so tiny. I remember I was the one that went to visit you in the hospital before your parents came and adopted you and brought you home." She said, "I knew your birth mother." She said she was young and she loved you very much. She said, "I don't know if I'll be able to find her, but I'll try." So I hung up the phone thinking that was the most odd conversation. I mean, who keeps one baby picture on their desk for 21 years? But little did I know that she knew what I didn't know, and that's that my life was a miracle. And she called me back on Christmas Eve of that year. This was 2008. And she said, "Claire, your birth mother would love to meet you. I found her." And so we set the meeting up. We planned what we would eat, what we would wear, what we would listen to, the music we would play in the background, what pictures I would show her. I brought a stack about as big as Texas of my whole life to show her. And she got there. She knocked on the door. We met at a friend's house. And the moment she opened the door, I never once heard. I don't know what we ate. I don't know what we listened to. I don't even know what pictures I showed her, because all I could see was this woman standing before me, and I knew instantly that I adored her, and I was so grateful for her. And so we had this picture perfect, just like my sister's reunion was with her birth mother. I thought it couldn't get any better, and I knew that I wanted to continue my relationship with her. And so we set up a second meeting, and this is the meeting that changed my life forever. I actually flew to Oklahoma, where she lived, where she would have raised me if she had kept me. And I brought a gift for her. And it was a ring and a necklace with my birthstone on it, and a card. And on the card, I don't know why, but all I wrote was, "Thank you for choosing life for me." And I signed my name. And I got there. I thought, this will be our moment. This will be our moment where I tell her everything she's longed to hear for 21 years. We'll make this connection. This will be our redemption story. And that evening, I gave her the gift, and she opened the ring and the necklace, and she cried really happy tears, just like I wanted her to. And then she read the words on the card, and everything in the room changed that day. Everything changed. What were happy tears turned into sad tears. And I remember being so confused as she just kept saying, "Claire, I didn't choose life for you. I'm so sorry. I didn't." And she grabbed my hand. She took me into this room in her home. We sat on the bed, and she started telling me about being pregnant with me at 13 years old. And our mother told her that there was one choice for her, and that was to have a late-term D&E dismemberment abortion, and that's what she did. She had a late-term D&E dismemberment abortion in Oklahoma, surrounded by doctors who never once asked her what her choice would have been. And she was sent home, told that her life would go back to normal, but she said it didn't. In fact, she returned to the doctor after things didn't seem right, and they told her that, oops, she had been pregnant with twins, and that one was successfully aborted, but that I had survived my birth mother's abortion. They asked her what she wanted to do, and her mother quickly spoke up and said, my daughter's still 13. She's still not ready to be a mother. We need our life to go back to normal. We need a second abortion. And so my birth mother was actually driven to Kansas to have a second abortion and was being examined by this doctor. Back then, Kansas, that was the place you went for any type of abortion at any gestational age. And by this point, she was over 6 months along, and they were willing to do it until they examined her, and they said, you're actually leaking amniotic fluid, and it's too dangerous for you, for your life, not your baby's, but for your life, to perform that second abortion. And so my birth mother was turned away, so I actually made it out of 2 abortion facilities alive. My birth mother was then dropped off at Deaconess, the adoption home where Debbie was there to greet her, and her mother left her there. She never came back until after she delivered me to see her daughter, and Debbie was the one who lived with my birth mother and took care of my birth mother for the few weeks she was there until I was born, 10 weeks premature, weighing 3 pounds, 2 ounces, with a dislocated hip, with club feet. And over the first couple years of my life, I would go through body casts and visit the Children's Crippled Hospital as the doctors tried to put back my body together. As you can imagine, this is not what I expected. I thought the worst thing that will happen is she won't want to meet me. I never imagined that I would find out that I was aborted, that I was a twin. This single most life-altering moment of my life that actually happened is still, to this day, almost 13 years later, still hard to believe. But God gave me an incredible family. He gave me an incredible family that taught me that I can have confidence in disappointment, that I can know where to turn when things seem out of control and confusing. And so that night when I got back to the room that I was staying in after I heard this whirlwind of my birth story from my birth mother, and I began to try to process what this meant for me, I sat down on that same bed and I picked up the phone and I called my parents and I told them what I had just found out. And I'll never forget, because it changed my life, I'll never forget what they said to me. They said, God's fingerprints are all over your life, Claire. He must have a really big plan for you. You get to choose to trust God. Imagine what he'll do if you're willing. So my new reality, as I sat there on the phone with my parents, my new reality was not what I thought. My new reality was that I was an abortion survivor. I was a twinless twin in the name of choice. That my twin was dismembered in the womb next to me. That was my new reality. But I knew, because of how I was raised, that my circumstances didn't define who I was. That I am wanted, chosen, and loved, that I am forgiven and redeemed, and that I had a choice to make in that moment. I could either choose what my birth mother thought I would and run out of the room that day and never look back and never speak to her again and choose to be angry and upset and lead down the road that leads to. Or I could choose to do what has been done for me time and time and time again, and that is to choose to forgive. And I chose to forgive my birth mother that day. My birth mother actually said in her own words on a Focus on the Family interview a couple years ago that she joins me for, she said, Claire, I aborted your twin. Then I tried to abort you, and when that didn't work, I gave you away. How could you ever love or forgive me? And the miraculous thing is, I don't even know that I could grasp what she told me in the room that day. What I could grasp is the foundation that was laid for me as a child, that God loves and forgives. So instead of running for her, God gave me his heart for her. And I knew that all those things that my parents said about me, that I was wanted, chosen, and loved, a child of God, redeemed, forgiven, that he said that about her too. And what Jesus did for me on the cross, he did for her too. And so I forgave my birth mother, and I know that was such a huge healing part of my story as I went home to process this news, to live this new reality that I am an abortion survivor. Because I would eventually have to go home and I would have to tell my family, and I would have to tell my friends, and I would have to figure out what it meant to live this new reality. And so I didn't know. I remember going and telling a few people. I told a couple friends, and of course they didn't know how to respond. How do you respond when somebody tells you this news about themselves? And I remembered the people on the sidewalk. And so I went back to those people. And it was actually right after, about 2 weeks after Abby Johnson had quit her job at that Planned Parenthood. And so she was there that day. And the people that helped her leave her job, they were there that day. And I told them this story. And of course, they wept with me. And they encouraged me to share my story. And I remember thinking, like, this is not a good decision. I am an introvert. I hate controversy. Somebody else could share this story better than me. And it was so raw and real at that time. I was still trying to process what it meant, but they said, Claire, I really think this could make it real for people. Just try it. And so I did. I spoke at a small Catholic youth group, and they told me I would speak one time, and joke's on me because I got there and they said, you're actually going to share it 3 times today. And after the 3rd time, I was talking to these kids, and I remember every single time I spoke, these light bulbs just went off in their head, and they were able to humanize the unborn child. Somebody once said to me a few years ago when I was speaking, he said, Claire, I realized when I was looking at your face, I was looking at your twin. I was looking at the aborted baby. He said, that made it real for me. And I watched as that happened in these kids' eyes as I was sharing my testimony with them. Something just clicked. It became real for them, and they had this newfound desire to go out and to be that type of person we talked about, that person of integrity who stands for truth. And I said, okay, God, I'll speak as long as you ask me to. And here I am 13 years later. He's asked me to do this about 30 times. I'm as uncomfortable every single time as I was the first time. But I believe 100% that God gave me my story for such a time as this, so that you could know the face and the name and the story of the aborted baby, but also so you could know the face and the name and the story of the woman like my birth mother who's desperately looking for someone like you to stand in the gap for her, to tell her that she is worth it, that she is worthy of walking alongside of. Because she's told me time and time again that that's all it would have taken for her, is for one person, a person like you, to say, you can do this. You are worth it. You are strong. You are capable of being a mother. In fact, I am going to walk alongside you every step of the way. That's all it would have taken for her. If you're like me, I never let the reality of what abortion is, what it does, sink into my mind or into my heart, not until I learned that I barely escaped death through abortion. Not until I learned that I was the type of person that had been affected by abortion, the type of person that I never thought that I would be. And today I'm asking you, what would it take for all of us to let that reality sink into our hearts, into our minds, and sink in so much that it moves us to action? I told you that I knew Abby Johnson, and a few years ago they made the movie Unplanned. And when they made the movie Unplanned, she actually invited me to come to one of the behind-the-scenes filming of it. And I had the opportunity to invite my birth mother because it was being filmed in the same town that my birth mother had her abortion, and she lived about 10 minutes away. So I had this great idea. I wanted my birth mother to meet Abby and all of my other friends who are these pro-life leaders who are advocating for women like my birth mother, who had been praying for my birth mother since they met me and found out my story. And so I invited my birth mother to come. What I didn't know was that they were going to be filming the behind the scenes of the abortion procedure scene, the room. And so my birth mother would be touring through this behind the scenes room of an abortion clinic room, like one she went to at 13 years old, like two she went to at 13 years old, and the one where she successfully aborted my twin. And I remember when I found that out, I thought, is there any way I can get out of this? How can I walk her back into the most painful moment of her life? This was a horrible decision. What have I done? And as we walked through, I remember she just kept saying, Claire, I remember the smells. I remember the sounds. I remember how my baby was placed over there. I remember the silence. I remember nobody speaking to me. I remember, and she wept. But afterwards, Abby invited everyone back into this room where we had dinner, and Abby got up and she talked about the forgiveness of God and how he had forgiven her for 8 years as she participated in the abortion industry. And my birth mother leaned over to me and she said, Claire, if God could forgive her, I wonder if he could forgive me. And he has. And today, as you process my story, I want you to know that today we have hope. And our hope is that one day Christ will come back and he will make all things new and he will make all things right. But until then, I want to encourage you to be that type of person that we were talking about earlier, that type of person who has integrity, the type of person who chooses to stand for truth, who cares about and prays about things that matter daily. And this does what we're here gathering today to talk about, to celebrate life. Our advocacy, it's life or death for someone like me. I want you to choose to be a person who's bold in how you serve and how you love, who doesn't compromise or remain apathetic, and a person who stands for women and children. And I want to close by just asking you that one simple question that my parents asked me in my moment of confusion, my moment of conviction. Can you imagine what God will do if you're willing? Thank you so much for having me.